Formula 1 is facing an unprecedented situation in 2021 as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, with teams carrying over their cars for a second season. But that doesn't mean that everything in Grand Prix racing is staying the same. Indeed, a delve into the final signed-off 2021 F1 regulations that have been published by the FIA show that there are a number of detailed revisions to next year's rules that will throw up some fresh challenges. Let's take a look at what the amended rules look like for 2021, starting with the new floor regulations. This change has come about in response to the ever-increasing amount of downforce teams are delivering, which is punishing tyres like never before. With Pirelli supplying largely the same tyres it has for the past 2 seasons, it was agreed that the cars needed to be held back. The FIA and the teams agreed that car tweaks should reduce downforce by approximately 10%, to counteract the gains that have been made in the recent period. The original plan was to have a diagonal cut in the floor ahead of the rear tyre, reducing the team's ability to manipulate airflow by introducing slots, holes, and shaped aerodynamic furniture in that region of the floor. However, data collected during the opening few races of the season convinced the rule makers that this would not be enough to meet the 10% reduction target, as teams had already found more performance than anticipated this season. As such, the regulations went further, and now prevent the designers from having any fully enclosed holes in the entire rear section of the floor, as it was feared that some may be able to find performance in this area. The load tests conducted on the floor have also been sharpened up too. The point at which they are measured has had to be adjusted, and so too has the amount of flex which will be allowed. Rather than a 10mm tolerance, the floor will now only be allowed to flex up to 8mm vertically when 500 newtons of load is applied. This reins in the possibility of finding gains through an over-flexible surface. The diffuser has also been amended to lessen its ability to create downforce, with the height of the dividing strakes required to be 50mm shorter next season. Meanwhile, to lessen aerodynamic influence, the designers are unable to use winglets mounted in the lower half of the rear brake duct that are any wider than 80mm. The upper half retains the 120mm limit. Teams have been busy investigating how these changes are going to impact on their designs going into next season, and several have already tried full-scale packages to gather some real-world data. For example, McLaren tested a floor with the diagonal cutout all the way back in the Belgian Grand Prix, while Ferrari and Red Bull have been seen with 2021 specification parts more recently. Aside from these aero changes, F1 cars will also be getting heavier than they currently are. The minimum weight of the car has been increased by a further 3 kg for 2021. It is now up to 749 kg. Meanwhile, the minimum weight of the power unit has been increased too, rising to 150 kg, which should ease concerns from engine manufacturers of needing to chase exotic and expensive materials in a bid to save weight. Unchanged from the previous regulations that were available, but of importance given the recent ban on qualifying modes, teams will only be permitted to have a set number of engine modes at their disposal each season. A table in the regulations presents a sliding scale that will permit less flexibility as we move through to 2025, with only 5 team applications, 5 power unit applications, and 3 energy recovery system and power unit control electronics applications allowed next season. There have also been changes to the wording in regards to the wastegate and their tailpipes. Cars are currently required to have at least one wastegate tailpipe, but from now on they won't have to run the additional pipework if the manufacturer can design a system that doesn't require a wastegate. This is a very interesting proposition given the role the MGU-H would play in this. The use of exotic valve and stem designs have also been reined in. The shape of any hollow cavity is now required to have a uniform cylindrical shape of a constant diameter. Oh, and in case you didn't already know, DAS is gone. Admittedly, we've known this since the start of the season, but Mercedes' dual-axis steering system will not be allowed next season, with changes already made within the regulations early on to rule out the use of the adjustable system for 2021 onwards. This is a way to ensure that teams are not forced to embark on an expensive spending war to develop their own systems, a spending war that would not be wise given the current pandemic situation. One interesting note in the regulations is the new inclusion of green materials, with natural fibres such as flax, hemp, linen, cotton and bamboo now under the permitted materials section. Carbon fibre composites have reigned supreme in Formula 1 for decades, with John Barnard's McLaren MP4-1 paving the way for the lighter and stronger material to become ubiquitous in Formula 1. One of the downsides of carbon fibre is that in the event of damage, there is the chance for sharp shards of debris to be left behind. Natural fibre composites reduce a significant portion of this risk and could be considered the future material for risk-exposed components. Natural fibre company YCOM and BComp recently designed, optimised and crash tested a front impact absorbing structure that produced results in line with a traditional carbon fibre structure. The crash design tested was approximately 40% heavier than a similar carbon fibre design, but as we know only too well, Formula 1 is all about progress. So while the starting point might not be so attractive, who knows how far the weight could be cut back in the future. Natural fibre composites would also dramatically lessen the environmental impact of Formula 1. An interesting aside when we consider how F1 and motorsport in general would like to be perceived in the public eye. Looking away now from solids to liquids, the FIA have included some new rules relating to sorting out the fuel situation. In an effort to combat the use of oil and lubricants as a method of boosting combustion, the FIA has continually clamped down on oil burning tactics in the last few years. Similarly, the inclusion of 2 fuel flow meters, both with different anti-aliasing properties, prevents nefarious tactics being used to defeat the purpose of what used to be just 1 meter, a measure that put the pin in Ferrari's controversial power unit from last year. In the case of both fuel and lubricants, the number of specifications used throughout the course of the season have been pulled back, with the previous season's formulations and just 1 new set being allowed for 2021. And as a final talking point, we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't talk about how the FIA are stopping a pink Mercedes repeat. The furore surrounding the design of the Racing Point RP20 at the start of the season has died down recently, but the latest draft of the regulations look to make certain that there will not be a repeat. A new section at the tail end of the regulations covers the listed parts more extensively than ever before, outlining how a team might naturally follow the design concept of another without directly copying it. Teams are reminded that they may only obtain information on their competitors' designs at events or tests, and it must be information that is potentially available to all competitors. The use of reverse engineering techniques such as stereophotogrammetry and 3D capture or scanning tools have now been prohibited. In effect, this limits teams to using just regular video or photography. In such cases where a competitor is deemed to have a listed part that resembles another, the FIA can request that the team demonstrates its entire design process, including any work carried out ahead of the regulation coming into force. Will these 2021 rules changes shake up the order for next year, or are we set for more of the same? Let us know what you think in the comments below, make sure you're subscribed and join us as we begin to look ahead to next season.